The views expressed by individuals on this program are their own and do not represent any organization, the Army National Guard, or the Army writ large. Welcome to Leaders Recon. We will be discussing leadership, warrior skills, and other unique opportunities within the G3 Leader Development Branch. I'm your host, Joshua Carr, and today we're going to be discussing the Army Congressional Fellowship Program with Major Sands. Major Sands, welcome to the program.
Appreciate you having me.
For those that are not as familiar with your background, I know that everyone has a different reason for why they were interested in joining the military, with all different backstories. What was yours?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, Desert Storm was in the early 1990s. I was in grade school. I had an uncle that served in Desert Storm, and just the military was a part of our family. My great-grandfathers both served in World War I. So service was always kind of connected to our family. And as I was getting older, throughout the 1990s, I became more and more interested in the military. And then in 2000, I decided to join. It was pre-9/11. At that point, I decided if I wanted to try out the Guard to see if I would enjoy the military. While I went to college at the same time, I made a promise to my mom that I would finish school. She knew if I just went and joined the Army, that I would probably never come back and go to school. She knew I would just fall in love with it, and her dream was always to make sure that I got my college education. So I joined when I was 17, so I had to have her sign and my dad sign. And that was kind of our agreement, and then I just ended up falling in love with the Guard and did a deployment when I was in college after 9/11, and just fell in love with the soldiers I worked with, and decided to make a career in the Guard.
Huh. So you enlisted then straight out of high school?
Yeah, I was a senior in high school. I was 17. I joined on my 17th birthday. So actually this October, I'll be 37, and I'll have my 20-year letter. So it's pretty unique to be able to retire if you wanted to at 37, but I enjoy it. I love it. I'm going to keep going, but yeah.
That's a pretty cool background. So before we dive into kind of your experiences as a Congressional Fellow, can you kind of give us an overview of, like, I've heard it's a 44-month program, but like what does that 44 months consist of?
Absolutely. So the Army Congressional Fellowship is actually ran by the headquarters department of the Army. There's 26 fellows currently right now that get selected. It's very competitive. Typically there's a few hundred, several hundred applicants that apply for the fellowship. And 3 of the fellows are always from the National Guard. Okay. 3 are from the reserves. So we have a good mix of compos within the fellowship and experiences. So the fellowship is broken down essentially into 3 phases. And the first phase is the academic phase. So once you get selected, you PCS to DC, and you go to George Washington University, and you get a master's degree in legislative affairs. Oh, wow. And then during that time, you're taking advantage of the academic experience. You're sitting through think tank discussions and conversations. You're going to different events that they send out through AUSA and other organizations to hear leaders talk, get ingrained in the defense community. And then that following year, that January, after you start your education portion, and then on January 1st, you get assigned to an office, either on the Senate or the House. And that's with a member of Congress that has defense equities or is on a committee of oversight for the Department of Defense. So it's usually half and half go to the House, half go to the Senate, and then you serve for 1 year as a member of that staff. The member of Congress is your rater and your senior rater. Like, your whole intent is to work on their priorities and their issues and help them. You're there to build commonality and build understanding and relationships with that office. So they get an understanding of, hey, these are what soldiers are, these are who they are, this is how they operate, this is their experience. They know someone they can rely on. It brings transparency to the Department of Defense. And then the same for us is we learn how they work. We appreciate, the processes that they go through. We appreciate, their viewpoints and this very unique relationship between the civilian oversight of the Department of Defense. And then you bring that back to your kit bag, if you will, and you serve for that 1 year. And at the following that 1 year on the Hill, you transition back to what they call the Utilization Phase, and that's for 2 years. And those 2 years, you work somewhere in the legislative affairs, either for the National Guard Bureau Legislative Liaison Shop, or for the headquarters part of the Army. They have the office of the Chief of Legislative Liaison. So you can get a position somewhere in there doing legislative liaison work, using those relationships with Congress.
So that's the part of the fellowship that you're in right now, correct?
Correct, yep. So I'm in what they call the Programs Division within the Office of Chief of Legislative Liaison. And what that means is I have a portfolio I'm responsible for.
Okay.
And they take the Army's portfolio, they break it up, and we work with the authorizers on both the House and Senate, and we work on programmatic issues with Congress. So if they have questions, they come to us. We work with the Army staff or the Secretariat to reply and provide them answers to their questions, and then vice versa. We provide them notifications of things that the department is doing. We build up relationships, and then we also, whenever they go on congressional delegation trips or staff delegation trips anywhere to visit any Army equity, we take them on those trips as well too, so they can see, get out and actually feel and touch what the Army is doing and visit the soldiers. And as they're considering things within the National Defense Authorization Act, they actually can see, okay, what does it mean when I'm providing additional funds for this program or this initiative or this exercise? Let me go see the soldiers doing this training and see how they're building.
Yeah, get that hands-on experience almost.
Exactly.
So like, obviously you have the suit as the uniform today.
Yes.
Every time I'm around, seeing the legislative folks around, you see them all rocking the suits, when they come up back and forth with their visits.
Yep.
Can you explain that? What is that? You wear the suit. Is that the whole program, or what's the mindset behind that?
So you wear it throughout the entire program. When you're on the Hill, you absolutely wear it because you're there to be a member of that staff, right? You are there to work for leadership in that office, and you don't want to stick out, right? Wearing the uniform every day, you do get treated a little bit different on the Hill, right? In a positive, a very positive way. But you want to be a member of that team, right? Like any team within the military, the Army, right? You build in cohesion, esprit de corps. And so when you're wearing the suit all day, it allows you to fully integrate, and they view you as a member of our team together, right? Not hey, he's the defense fellow. Eventually they the good people that build good relationships, that line will be blurred in their mind, in the staff's mind, and you're just a member of their team, okay? And then the same when we're working on, when we come to utilization phase, we continue to wear suits. And again, we are trying to break down that relationship, and they see us as, hey, I'm Richie, right? I'm not Major Sands. I'm Richie. I can talk to Richie, get answers. We're building relationships. He's someone that I can go to and I trust to get information from or receive information from, and really talk through complex ideas and issues. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're in a suit, and also when you're navigating the halls of Congress as well too. You just kind of blend in with your surrounding, and you're able to get around effectively and talk and communicate with folks and just really break it down to a personal level.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple times relationships when you were talking there. You want to kind of highlight what, it seems like that's an important part of your role as a defense fellow. You want to kind of talk a little bit about those experiences you've had with that?
That's the biggest key for success for me, is the relationships that I have and I build, right? True, real relationships help you effectively communicate and what's going on, especially when there's tough times or tough issues that come up, right? So my whole goal and the way I gauge my own success is how effectively am I building relationships with staff members on the Hill, right? How am I able to communicate with them? Do they feel comfortable coming to me with issues? If they hear something, can they come to me first and discuss that issue before it becomes a larger problem, right? Mm-hmm. Can we talk about it on the staff level? Do they have that comfort to bring it to me and discuss it? And also, if they want to go see something or visit an equity, you want them to think, hey, I need to go see this exercise at this country at this time. I want them to know that, hey, they can come to the Army, request that, because as we go on these, delegation trips with them, we're just fostering that better understanding. We're able to talk about the Army and the National Guard's priorities. We're able to effectively work those as we're building these relationships. And the message is better received when you're able to have a close relationship versus just hey, I know there's a guy over there I need to talk to, right? Yeah.
So kind of backtracking a little bit then, at the beginning you said the first phase was an education phase. Can you explain a little bit about your time as a student?
Yeah, so it was an amazing opportunity. This is something that's unique. All the services have fellows, okay? Mm-hmm. The Army is the only service with the Army Congressional Fellowship Program where where you are required to go to school and get your master's degree in legislative affairs. And the program that we go through at George Washington is designed for Hill staffers or those wanting to be a Hill staffer to get a graduate understanding of Congress and how it works. So our classes are taught by former members of Congress, former staff members, current staff members. There's a couple that were former fellows that were in there, former lobbyists, very successful people. And they bring in guest speakers from the Hill. They bring in very senior staff members to talk to you, to educate you, to train you as well too. And then the classes are made up of the fellows, but also, 3/4 or so are actual students from the Hill or those wanting to be on the Hill.
Oh, really?
So you're getting their experiences. You're in these group conversations in an educational environment, academic environment, where they're talking about their experiences currently on the Hill. And you're just really, truly appreciating and understanding not just does the Congress designed to work, but how does it actually work? So class was, it was in the evenings to accommodate the Hill staffers that were taking classes. It was located right in Capitol Hill, extremely rewarding. And then when we went to go on the Hill and transition, we had a very good understanding, much more than our peers from the other services, exactly how does Congress work and how can I be effective, and just who are the key players, how are things made up, what's the composition of the offices, what's the difference between the Senate Armed Services Committee versus the Senate Appropriations Committee, what's their roles and responsibilities, constitutionally, what's their divide, and why does it matter to us, and how can we effectively work with them? So it's a very, very unique program, and half of it is required coursework. The other half is electives, and those electives are built. Some of them are built around the defense industry, about the budget process. So when you come away, you're able to talk that language. Like Capitol Hill, just like the Department of Defense, we have our own acronym, right? We have our own acronyms that we can lose people on really quickly. Capitol Hill is no different. There's buzzwords, there's vernacular they use where you can get lost very quick if you don't understand it. And that academic year made it so when you go up there, you can kind of understand what they're talking about, what's going on. So when you get to the office, you might not be running at all, but you're at least able to walk, maybe jog. And by the time you're done with that 1 year, you feel very comfortable working in that environment.
So do you have any background before? I know as guardsmen, we have all different backgrounds. I spent a few years as a civilian working on the political side a little bit. Yeah. What was your kind of background before coming to the Hill? Anything?
None. Zero. I hadn't taken a class on U.S. government since I was in high school because there's a requirement to graduate, right? I didn't take a single political science degree. This was an opportunity that my brigade commander, when I was a battalion S3, we were deployed. He had worked in OCLL on the Army staff, and he recommended it as a broading assignment. Huh. So he started talking to me about what it meant, what it is. I did some research and realized it's something I was interested in doing for a broading opportunity. It was something that was, highly competitive, which was a draw for me. I wanted to, see how that process worked and compete. Mm-hmm. I was successful and very fortunate to be selected. And when I did, I legitimately bought, and it's funny because there's like 4 or 5 other people that have told me they did the same thing within the fellowship. We purchased the Congress for Dummies book on Amazon just to make sure that we were like brushing off that surface rust because it had been so long since we talked about some of these issues.
Those processes.
Exactly. And I told people that kind of jokingly. A lot of them piped up and was like, I did the same. Like, don't feel bad. Like I was there with you, right? Because they don't want people applying for the program they don't just want people to apply for the program that are extremely educated in politics. That's not the whole point. The point is to bring a unique perspective, broad experiences to the Hill, to the fellowship. So when you look at each fellowship cohort of 26 fellows, the branches are very wide ranging, right? You have artillerymen, you have infantry, combat arms, we have a nurse, we have a couple medical services corps, you have engineers, it's spread out.
Just across the whole formation.
Exactly. They want, we have cyber, so it's exactly, they're not, every single corps has a JAG and 1 DA civilian, so it's as wide as they can cast to bring all those experiences together to show Congress varying. And
well, that probably helps you guys too, right? On being able to, the fellow to call about whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're leaning on each other for their experiences, right? And that's what's good about the academic years. You get to know your other fellows throughout that year in a very relaxed setting, an academic setting. And that way, when you go to the Hill, you can work together to network to help, again, educate each other, bring understanding, share your experiences. Because your experience in the Hill It varies.
Yeah. So talking about going to the Hill, you were placed with a member of Congress. What can you talk about that a little bit and like how that placement process works? Do you get to pick a member and be like, hey, I want to go there, or how does that work?
Right. No, it's fantasy football. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's the easiest way to describe it. That's how we're told. It's like a fantasy football draft. So as you're getting ready in the fall before your transition to the Hill, so about October timeframe, DoD actually leads the effort initially.
Okay.
They send out a call to all the members of Congress that are on a Defense Oversight Committee, and they say, if you're interested in receiving a Department of Defense Fellow, please send us a letter. Let us know what experiences you're looking for. And then all the services get together with DoD, and they look at all the letters they receive from members of Congress, and they say, okay, who's going to have, which service is going to have a fellow with these offices? Which one do you want, right? They go through this whole process together. And OSD oversees, which ones make the best sense, right? And it's not just with the Senate or House Appropriations Committee or the Senate and House Armed Services Committees, right? You got to make sure also with members of Congress, you're getting the ones that, sit on foreign relations, intel. You want to make sure that you're getting a wide net to show those experiences, and you're shifting around to make sure that you're working with different members. So OSD and the departments do that together. And then they send us the list, the Army, says, hey, these are the 26 offices that through the selection process with OSD that we have. And we rank them first all the way from number 1 to 26. And then you write a little synopsis of why did you select them? Why did you rank them, right? What's your interest? For your top 3 and your bottom 3, right? Like, what made you want these offices? What made you not want these offices? And you go through a board process and you explain that and your interests, and then they take that into consideration. And then the Army looks at your experiences versus what the members were requesting, and they kind of try to match it up, right? And there's sometimes you get your number 1 pick as the fellow, but it's also the needs of the Army. For instance, there was one member of Congress that wanted to have a logistician. They had a depot in their district, and they had some questions on the depot. And they said, hey, if I have a logistical officer in my office, they can help that. They speak that language, right? Another member happened to say, hey, I have a lot of medical issues that I'm receiving from constituents. I heard there's a nurse, a medical services officer coming up. I'd like to have a nurse, and so that kind of played match.
Yeah, they get that experience that they're looking for.
Exactly, because it helps them understand the issues and then respond to constituents. And that's what it's all about, right? Keeping the constituents happy.
Yeah, so how about that? Like, I kind of mentioned some of my background before, right? Like I had to balance, because I was a political appointee, right? So I had to balance, a job as a political appointee and as a drilling soldier,
right.
As a military officer as well, right at the start of my career. And so, looking at the same thing, I guess, for you, asking that question, how do you balance, working in one of these offices, especially with some of the, high politically charged climates, and your role as a defense fellow?
Absolutely. So you take an oath of office, right? And you never break that oath. And one thing that we learned throughout the school phase, and something I came to appreciate, was the personal offices here in D.C., those are not the political offices of the members of Congress, right? They're there as personal staff to work on policy. Now, they're always, obviously the politics are in the back of their mind, but they're not the campaign staff, right? That's by law separated. So they're just working on issues up here in Congress, help to advocate for their districts, for their members, for their constituents. So as you're working up here and you're a member of that staff, that's where you work on. You're advising on policy, not on politics. And you have to make sure that you don't cross that line. There's a fine line there that you gotta avoid. But for a lot of us, we sat down with our staffs when we first got assigned, just make that clear, right? Over a cup of coffee, have a very low key conversation. Just make sure they're aware, like, hey, if there's any time that I feel like you're talking more, from a political angle or discussion, like I can't violate my oath. So I will either defer or I'll just stay quiet. But my experience was they never put you in that position, right? They understood that. They knew what your role was there, and that was to be a policy advisor to the staff, to the member on defense-related issues or veteran-related issues, right? You weren't there to be a politician. You're not a politician, right? So it's it was very rewarding to work with the staffs, and they understood your
Yeah.
position, and they really appreciate your experiences, and they understand the situation you're in. So
talking about rewarding experiences, I'm sure you had a lot of memorable experience on the Hill. What stands out to you the most, or can you give us an example of like one of your most memorable or experiences?
absolutely. So when I was looking to go to the Hill, I wanted to go to an office that was on the Senate Armed Services Committee, because they are the ones that, first of all, this interests me, but they also have requirements for the confirmation process. The Senate, just the way that they were made up, was more appealing to me. The staffs are a little bit larger, so you get a mile deep on issues of understanding, but maybe an inch wide, because there's so many staffers, they can spread out their workload. In the House, the staff's a lot smaller, so you're kind of working a mile deep and an inch wide in your understanding. So I went to the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I also knew, because when I was in the academic phase, that's when President Trump had announced that he wanted to initiate the Space Force. All right, so I knew that the consideration and the policy was going to start with the Senate House Armed Services Committees, right? So I wanted to go to SASC, because it made all the criteria that I wanted. So last year, one of the most rewarding things you can do as a fellow or a staff member is help create your boss's position on a topic or an issue. And it's very difficult with members that have been in for a long time, because they've already kind of set their position. Their positions are known, but Space Force was new. And I got to work for an amazing office. I worked for Senator Gary Peters from Michigan. He's on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And Space Force last year, as we had a hearing on Space Force. And as a staff, we really were working with the senator to understand where his thoughts were and educate him and really help craft that position, right? And get his feedback. So it was provide information, get feedback, bring additional information, get more feedback, trying to determine where the boss's position was on certain things, and then sit through the Space Force, the hearing, where it was the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. It was amazing to watch that process unfold of having a hearing where they were talking specifically about creating a new branch of the military, right? Regardless of if you wanted to see Space Force created or not, it didn't matter, right? Just the historic process, they hadn't done that since the Air Force was created. So it's like I said, it's once in a 70-year opportunity to
getting to be a part of something like that.
Exactly. So it was amazing to see that unfold through the legislative process last year.
So then, coming off of these experiences, looking forward now, has it changed any of your goals, as a military officer, kind of career path stuff, or how did it affect your perspective?
Well, I think there's two different questions there, right? Perspective versus my career goals, right? It hasn't shifted my career goals. I still have a path that I want to see myself on, but I think it's very important to broaden yourself and your understanding, right? To become a professional soldier, professional officer, to think holistically about issues and topics, and then truly understand how the civilian oversight of our military is conducted and done, and their perspective, and how they view things through their own lens, right? And then build those relationships as well too. So, being a fellow and then transition to being a battalion S3 or battalion commander, right? You just think holistically about topics, and you're able to help develop your subordinates as you transition, right? So it hasn't changed my career path. It's enhanced it. It's enhanced my love for the department, for my country. Absolutely gave me a unique perspective, a new perspective, and appreciation for how things in Capitol Hill work. When the cameras are off and seeing how staffs and members interact and discuss topics, to sit in a meeting, I was very fortunate on multiple times. I got to sit in meetings behind closed doors with the senator, our staff, and then almost every principal leader in DoD last year. And hearing those closed door conversations and through osmosis, essentially, right, just absorbing how that interaction and their thoughts behind a closed door was invaluable to help me develop as an officer moving forward. So it kind of gives into perspective, right? A new perspective, a new understanding, and a true appreciation for the sacrifices and the service that even the Hill staffers make. You don't realize how young they are. Really, they start off very low-paying jobs, but they're very dedicated to their country, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. They're all patriots, and they all try to do what they think is best for their constituents and for the country. And to see how they start and to hear their stories of coming up and doing unpaid internships, highly educated, very, very, very intelligent people coming up here and taking small odd jobs just with a hope or a dream of getting a member to work for a member and build their resume and their career up through that. I mean, it's a very grassroots approach. Several people I worked with last year told me they moved here from California, from Michigan, or from Chicago without a job. They just moved out here hoping to find a member that would give them an internship of an unpaid job so they could build a resume to get in office. It's just something you don't think about or you don't hear about. And
yeah, I feel like it's not, really well-known fact, like, hey, who are the staff up there? Talking about that a little bit, I feel like not a lot of people have a good understanding of like what is a staffer on the Hill, and the different types of staffers, personal and professional. Can you kind of give us an overview of, what is that demographic and, how are those two separate?
Yeah, so what you have is you have personal staff that works for the members of Congress in their office, and then the committees have committee staff or professional staff members. So the personal staff, again, it's a little bit unique based on the House versus the Senate because the House offices are somewhat smaller. They range from 5 to 10 people in the office that work for the member and all the constituent issues and policy issues, right? So they're very busy. And then the Senate, a little bit larger. I think, 20 to 30 depending on the office, some a little bit larger. What you'll see is the House average age is a little bit lower. It's like mid to low 20s is the average age of a Hill staffer in the House. Oh, wow. And it's, mid to upper 20s, low 30s on the Senate side. I forget the exact statistic, but, it's a lot younger than you think it is.
So you were like an old man then on the Hill.
I was definitely an old man. Yeah. There's a couple, some of the senior staff members or, the chiefs of staff and such, they have a little more experience, kind of like what I do. But yeah, when you're blending in, you're a little bit older, but you just gain a different appreciation of, when you're out in the force and you have a delegation come visit you, tour you, right? Whether it's a congressional delegation or staff delegation. It'd be easy for a senior leader in the Army to see these very young staffers and just have that perspective of, it's just a young person, right? Having done this now, complete appreciation and understanding of how extremely intelligent and smart they are in issues. There's staff members that I would take up against senior 06s and several general officers and say they could hold the water, if not do better in terms of talking about issues with multi-domain operations, the national defense strategy. They have a very holistic appreciation and understanding of the issues. Modernization efforts, acquisition process. Like, it is incredible to hear how quickly they pick it up and how much they understand and know. So that's the personal staff for the members. Professional staff, they are a lot more experienced, right? Again, they have policy, they have portfolios within the committees that they manage. Their age, I don't know the average age, but is higher. A lot of doctors, PhDs, doctorates. You have former political appointees from the Department of Defense to go over there and serve as a professional staff member. You have a lot of retired, 06s and above. They get hired in after they've done some legislative work or whatnot. People that transition from some of the think tanks to come over. Just extremely intelligent, highly qualified, highly educated people. And that's one of the best parts about the fellowship is learning from them and getting to know them and hearing their perspective on things.
So, kind of talking about that a little bit, how has all of your experiences and, relationships that you've developed over the course of the fellowship so far shifted your viewpoint on like strategic thinking or how you're going to approach your next assignment, whatever that is?
It's enhanced it considerably, right? There are tools in my kit bag I now have from seeing where they get information, how they process information, that is able to pick up and use now and will continue to do. You just, some of the reports and tools that are out there that you just gloss over, don't know exists. You know, it's a different culture that you just don't come to appreciate, realize until you've experienced it, until you're in the middle of it. So that's probably one of the biggest things is just, I like to think of problems holistically to try and understand and solve them. But now, just from a strategic perspective, right? Such a better appreciation for that. In my opinion, it can be difficult times for members in the Guard, especially if, like I came from a state, right? To truly get that strategic level experience, right? You get a little bit at your Joint Forces Headquarters, NGB. However, to really get that and broaden and come up and receive that kind of master's or PhD level education on strategic thinking from some of the most brilliant people that you'll be around, from the senior Army leadership and the staff right now, right? That is where you can bring that back to the Guard, to the States, and truly have a big impact, right? My current job right now, you know, we're working right with the staff or Secretariat and Headquarters Army Staff Directorate principals, right? So you're engaging with, you know, those assistant secretaries, G3, G1, G4, whatever your portfolio is, like you're working with those senior general officers, senior SESs, political appointees, the assistant secretaries of the Army, to help, engage with Congress, to help advise on how should we do those engagements, to help set up meetings and briefings. And then you're part of those meetings and briefings, and you hear that information being passed along in the process and the communication. So again, you're brought to the very top to have a holistic understanding of the Army enterprise and the Army National Guard enterprise and the National Guard Bureau's enterprise, right? It's not just, especially on the Hill, you're not, when you go to the Hill, you're not an Army fellow, okay? You're a defense fellow. The Army, the staff doesn't come to you and say, oh, I got a Navy issue, that's for somebody else, right? Like, no, you're the defense fellow. So you're asked that question to help gain an understanding for your members, because your members are worried about all the defense equities in their state or their district, right?
So, I mean, it sounds like an incredible opportunity. Well, like the experiences you had, just one of a kind. So if there's, let's say I was interested in applying for a fellowship program, like at what point in time in my career would I go about doing that? And like, what would be some of your advice and recommendations?
Absolutely. So the kind of the sweet spot demographic for those that are applying are post company battery or troop command. Some, if you've completed your battalion S3 time, so senior captain to junior majors is what the sweet spot is, what they're looking for, okay? And the application process is, like I said, competitive. It's a little lengthy. So every spring, sometime in late March, early April, applications are due. There's always a message that goes out to the force sometime in, I think, December about the broadening opportunities that are out there and the application deadlines and submission requirements. And you apply in that, like I said, that late March, early April timeframe. Department of the Army there's two boards for the fellowship program. Okay. First one meets in June, and they kind of take the first selection, and that's where they pick basically the primaries and the alternates, because they have primary and alternate selectees. So it's done at the Department of Army level, and then the second one is done right in the Pentagon at OCLL, and they do the second board, and they determine who the primary and alternates are basically going to be. There's some other nuances there, but that's the easiest way to explain it. And so you get notified in late August, early September that you were selected for the program, and then you actually don't report until the following May. So it's almost a little over a year from the time that you apply to the time they actually are selected and enter the fellowship program. So if you're interested in sorry.
Oh yeah, so I was just saying it's pretty lengthy. I mean, it's a lengthy process then. It
is. Something you got to map out within your career, and it's a big commitment, right? It's 4 years. It's an invaluable 4 years. Everybody looks at it as saying, 44 months. Like, that's a big time to step away. I need to be a battalion S3 and battalion XO, and then a brigade S3 to be successful on, the combat arms side, as an example. What I would challenge is say, you can make yourself unique and different in advanced understanding of strategic level thinking, right? You can still hit your key development assignment positions. The first step is always successful company battery command. because that's really where you need to separate yourself, from those that are applying, because so many people do apply, and they're extremely highly qualified people that are applying. And so yeah, that's the biggest thing. So the opportunity is also open to NCOs. E8s and E9s can apply. The E8s that we have in our program are usually, have finished their first sergeant time and have been very successful as first sergeants. There's a couple sergeant majors that were command sergeant majors and then applied and they're part of the program as well too. So they just have to have the education requirements, and it's all laid out in the announcement, right? So they have to have a degree. Because you're going to a master's degree, you have to be able to get accepted into George Washington University's master's program. So you have to have that bachelor's degree. But other than that, the requirements are pretty much the same.
So about that, like kind of talking about the packet, and I mean, it's a really competitive process, it sounds like. What are some of the things that you would give advice to both, NCOs and officers on things they can do to set themselves up for success? Maybe they're a little bit younger in their career, it's something they're looking forward to. What are some things that they can do to, set their resume apart, per se?
So first thing for officers and NCOs, successful company commander, first sergeant time, or if you're a senior E8 and you don't necessarily, your branch maybe doesn't have first sergeants, like whatever that key development assignment for you as an E8 is. That's the biggest one off the bat, okay? The other one is communicating early to your leadership that you're thinking about doing this, right? Because the program takes so long to get into, the application process is a year. You can be in the middle of your company command time, and if you're successful, if you have set yourself apart from your peers, and you can talk to your leadership about, hey, I'm thinking about applying for this program after I'm done here with my company command. That's one part, right? Because you're going to need 5 letters of recommendation, and those letters really help. That's a big piece of the determination of who you are, what those letters have to say. So you're gonna need to have, from us, you have to have a letter from the adjutant general.
That's what I was gonna ask. Where do those letters come from? Are they all military? Are they military and?
It can be both. It can be both military and civilian. Okay. For the National Guard, your adjutant general needs to be one of them. You have to have one from your command. So what I recommend is brigade. It just says from a commander, so I recommend brigade commander, because the more senior, the better. I like to say, as I'm advising some soldiers, right, the more stars, the better the letter. The more senior the person is to talk about your potential to be a future senior leader, because that's what, if you read the AR that outlines the broadening assignments, this one is developed for those that have potential to be senior, future senior leaders. So you need someone who is a senior leader to say that you have potential to be a senior leader, right? Okay. That's the best way to explain it. Also, for members of the Guard, because we're very connected, letters from your congressman or senator are absolutely acceptable, very highly encouraged if you have a relationship as well too, to help out. And because it's the Congressional Fellowship program, they can speak to that and how they would utilize you or whatnot. Or from your governor. So I know that for those that have applied, it's not just AGRs. In my cohort, the 3 National Guard officers that are members of the fellowship program, 2 of us are Title 32 AGR from the state. One of us is a typical, MDA, Title 32 MDA soldier.
So there's a little bit of both then.
Yep. And then if you look at all the fellows, like your group ahead of me, they have a couple that are Title 10 from NGB, 1 from the state. The year group behind me, same thing. They have a mix of AGRs from the state, traditional soldiers from the state, and Title 32 AGR Title 10 AGR from NGB. So they're looking for broad experiences from the Guard, just with those 3 as well too, right? So
all different backgrounds, all different experiences. I mean, it sounds like really if you're going to set yourself up for success, you just need to do well at whatever you're assigned at.
Exactly, because that's what they're doing. They're assessing your future potential, right? So say if you can get a second company command, a lot of the active duty officers I serve with, they had an HHB or HHC command following their line company or line battery. So that helps to show success at multiple commands as well too. Take opportunities of things that are out there that might make you unique or set you apart. I was very involved with state partnership training in Latvia. And that helped kind of set me apart, as I had this unique experience of working with a bilateral affairs officer and kind of talked a little bit of a different language, and working with other partners and allies and stuff like that. Deployment experience always helps to highlight that. I was enlisted for 10 years.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, if that, because I know you said you joined in 2000, right? So you probably did several deployments.
Yeah.
How does that factor in? Because it sounds like from what you're saying, they're really looking for someone that's an emissary, who represents their experiences across the military, not just solely the policy piece, right?
Exactly. So you're right. I've done 3 tours myself. It's not a criteria that you have to have deployed, but it helps your packet because it gives you something that's just a unique perspective to bring to the office about whether it's, a deployment is, as part in the European Deterrence Initiative or to the Middle East supporting the global war on terrorism or whatever that is, something that show that you have, left the state, left the nest, so to speak, right? Yeah. And have a different perspective on how things happen operationally and bring that back, it's not a requirement by any stretch, but it does help for sure. I think it helped me out a lot, mine.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you had to pinpoint it, because I mean you said there's 3 a year in the Guard, right? I'm assuming that there's a lot more people that apply. Yeah. What would you say was the key things for you? Your experiences. I know you kind of already touched on a few of them.
I think mine was certainly the deployments help because I had 3 very broad different deployments to the Middle East. Okay. I had a unique perspective because I was enlisted. So my first deployment, I was a team leader and squad leader, and I was enlisted for 10 years before I commissioned. So that helped me because I was able to say, hey, I have, experiences from being, the soldier, the E1, executing these policies, right? Like all the way up through until I was Battalion S3 as my last position before I applied. So that helped too. I was able to use that in my package to say, hey, I have something that's different. How do I separate myself? That's what I'm looking for as I'm reading applicants, right? Mm-hmm. How do they separate themselves from just everybody else, right? Certainly my evaluations and my letters of recommendation, that was a big piece too, right? You have to show or demonstrate that you have potential to be a future senior leader. Mm-hmm. And part of that is what's written in your evaluations and your letters of recommendation. And the third one was the state partnership training. And I heard that directly from some of the people that reviewed the packets was, I had a lot of experience helping establish the Joint Fires Observer Program in Latvia and working with our state partnership. And that was a big key of, again, just something that's unique, that's different.
Just to you.
Yeah. Yep. I volunteered, to help out with that. And that was something that grew over the course of several years. But it was just another little thing to say, this is why I'm different and why I should be considered to these other extremely highly qualified people that are applying.
So if there's a resource that you would recommend to soldiers, what would it be?
My biggest one for me is so simple, but it's read. I mean, I truly enjoy it. There's 3 different phases of development, right? You got your self-development, your institutional development, and your operational or experience development. For me, it's reading. It's not just reading military history. It's reading literature from varying, from articles in the Atlantic to books that are written.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was anything particular that you'd be like, hey, must read.
Yeah, so I'll tell you right now, one thing that I'm reading right now that I think is a good perspective on the situation that we're in is the Department of Defense. There's a book called The Kill Chain by Christian Burroughs, who is he's a former Hill staffer that worked for Senator McCain. Okay. And it just came out recently, and it's a good holistic understanding of near peer competition. How did our advantages, technological advantages erode? How did the wars in the Middle East impact our readiness and impact our focus in terms of Russia and Chinese threats? But there's other books out there too that you just go through and you get to look at holistically, and there's several commanders lists, right? But it's just having a worldly understanding. And then also, it sounds simple. Again, it's something you taught, at your commission source, OCS or ROTC or whatnot. But, current events, like so much is happening in our world right now, and it's happening so fast. There are several good tools, whether it's, or apps or agencies, whereas, Politico or if you hop on, Defense News Network, the Early Morning Brief, name a resource, but that daily morning of hopping out, whether you're a traditional soldier, AGR, continue to develop yourself regardless as a leader. Part of it's just understanding what's happening around you as well too. So those are the two things that I always stress to my folks.
Now, second part to that question, I guess, which is if you had one piece of advice for a junior leader, NCO officer across the formation, what would it be?
So for me, your people are your best resource, right? Having seen how the other services operate versus the Army and the Army National Guard and National Guard, holistically, both Air and Army, our people are number one resource. And soldiers are the best lie detector test I've ever met in my life, right? They know when someone is being real with them, when they're being genuine, right? As a young leader, listening to your soldiers, the E4s need, E1 to E4 sometimes have the best ideas. Listen to your non-commissioned officers and learn from their experience. Like we've had so many deployments and they're fading, right? Number of deployment, you're seeing a lot more lieutenants and captains that haven't had a deployment experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in that boat. I've never had the opportunity yet.
And that's not their fault. But you have NCOs that are extremely experienced, right? Pull that from them, right? And just be genuine with them, right? Show that understanding of hey, yes, you're in charge. You're the leader. You're the platoon leader. You're the XO company commander, whatever. But when you're genuine and you really show them that you care and you're listening, and then when you provide that guidance, right? Like you build that relationship with your subordinates to a point where you're able to effectively communicate, relate to them. It helps out immensely. And that's the biggest thing for young leaders right now is understanding, hey, I don't have the opportunities that some of these NCOs or soldiers did. How do I draw that from them? And it's very similar to when I joined in 2000. You had you had a few Desert Storm vets still walking around, and you really latched on to hear what they had to say based on their deployment experience from Desert Storm. But a lot of the company grade officers didn't have that opportunity, so they didn't have that experience. And when we deployed our first time, we relied heavily on them. So just use them as your resource. So another thing I would recommend to young leaders about too is volunteer. There are so many opportunities out there that you need to take advantage of. Whether it's trying to volunteer to help out, taking additional orders if you're a traditional soldier, like hopping on orders to help out with exercises, participate in training outside of a traditional annual training, trying to get involved with your state partnership program if you wherever that may be and what you do with it. Opportunities potentially with deployments. Look at the broadening opportunities that they have, not just for like the fellowship program, but there's other things out there where you can go work down at the Warrior Training Center in Georgia, right? As an example, and you can get some very unique schools, right? Like try new things to help add more experiences to your kit bag. And a lot of that is just raising your hand and saying, I would like to do that. I can show up and do more, whatever fits in your schedule. I know it's difficult depending on if you're a student or your civilian career, but whatever you're able to do, they'll help you on both military side and your personal life as well too.
Sir, thank you so much for coming today and sharing some of these incredible, unique experiences with us. Tune in to Leaders Recon over the next few weeks as we bring in today's leaders and pioneers to discuss their experiences, share their wisdom, and help you grow as a leader. We will also be announcing opportunities for you to sharpen your skills and expand your toolbox as a member in today's Army National Guard. See you next time. If you would like more information on any of the topics discussed today, please visit our social media pages in the links below. If you like this episode of Leaders Recon, please subscribe below and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.